Before that day, I always thought heavy pontoon bridges were the most stable things in the world. Until I saw it with my own eyes, the entire bridge was being pushed up from underneath the water. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a collapse. It was something slowly rising from the riverbed. At the time, 3 Humvees were right in the middle of the bridge. I heard this really muffled sound coming from under the bridge. Thump, 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 like someone was hammering the bridge from underwater. Nobody thought much of it at first, until bubbles started surfacing. Those bubbles were huge, bursting one after another, and the air was filled with the stench of rotting fish. Then, the bridge deck bulged. A several-ton aluminum bridge panel was forced up half a meter. I crawled to the edge and looked down. Just one look. I saw something underwater opening its eyes. That massive, dark gray thing underwater was slowly emerging. Every inch it pushed up, the heavy pontoons under our feet let out a dull groan, bursting from the immense pressure. The high-pressure air inside mixed with mud and water sprayed all over me, reeking like rotten fish buried in silt for decades. I was hanging onto the door handle of a Humvee, tilted at 45 degrees. "Mike, push the door. Push it now." I yelled at the top of my lungs. I saw Mike in the passenger seat, his face pressed against the window, desperately trying to shove the door open. But it was useless, completely useless. That dark gray mountain of flesh had crushed the whole vehicle, warping the body so badly that the creases locked the door shut like iron clamps. The massive shadow kept rising, and the waves it kicked up sent the bridge swaying. The entire Humvee started sliding down the broken slope, inch by inch. The tires screeched against the metal bridge deck. I saw that dark gray shadow waiting right under the wheels. It was wet, covered in a shell as hard as stone. It had no head, no face, just ring after ring of saw-like teeth spinning endlessly. Mike was still pounding on the glass, his eyes locked on mine. The front of the vehicle had already dipped in, and river water was pouring in through the shattered windows. I felt the door handle wobble in my grip, and I was sinking with the vehicle into that black shadow. The foam on the water grew thicker, a blinding white that blocked everything, except that enormous dark gray thing, still dragging us down, bit by bit. Half an hour earlier, this place looked perfectly normal. The sun was blinding, and this stretch of the Arkansas River was as flat as a mirror. Our unit had a simple job: lay down a heavy pontoon bridge capable of supporting tanks. I was squatting at the edge of the bridge, securing a lock bigger than my fist. That's when I felt something off underwater. How to describe it? It was like a giant groundhog burrowing under the mud beneath your feet, a dull, thunderous vibration traveling up through my thick boot soles. The toolbox beside me was dancing on the bridge deck, metal clanging against metal nonstop. Strings of bubbles rising from the deep water. Those bubbles were terrifyingly huge, each one the size of a fist. They burst on the surface with a pop, and a strange smell hit my nose, fishy, with a greasy undertone, like industrial oil. He saw me staring at the water and laughed, shoving me playfully, joking that the mud at the bottom was farting. But I couldn't shake the unease. I noticed the water gauge at the bridge's edge going crazy, shooting up and down wildly. It was bizarre, like there was a massive pump hidden underwater, endlessly sucking in and spitting out water. Soon, the bridge was finished. I stood at the bridgehead, waving to guide the first 3 Humvees slowly onto the center. The tires crunched against the aluminum deck, a steady, reassuring sound. But just as the lead vehicle reached the deepest part of the river, the entire bridge deck lurched upward. That startled everyone. It could have easily launched a grown man into the air. The whole heavy deck was forced up half a meter by some brute force from below. The Humvee's undercarriage scraped against the bridge structure, letting out a teeth-grinding screech. I rushed to the edge of the bridge and looked down. In the gaps between the bridge sections, I spotted a massive dark shadow beneath the water. It was absurdly huge, easily dozens of meters wide. Its color was a deep, purplish black, turning the already murky river water as dark as ink. The surface, which had been fairly calm, suddenly started bubbling like a boiling pot, churning out large patches of white foam. These bubbles spilled over the edges of the shadow, burying half the bridge. The air around me turned cold instantly. Standing on the bank, I could smell the stench of rotten, hot air rising from the bottom, making me want to rub my eyes. I stared at the shadow, which was still growing, and felt a chill run down my spine. That thing was pushing up against the thick steel plates, right under our feet. "What the hell is that?" Someone shouted over the walkie-talkie, their voice cracking with fear. Before I could turn my head, that deep gray mountain of flesh erupted from the water between two Humvees. It gave no warning at all. This monster didn't bother with stealth. It just slammed into the bridge deck with brute, irrational force. I watched as the heavy-duty aluminum bridge deck, weighing several tons, crumpled like a piece of waterlogged newspaper in front of this thing. With a deafening roar that numbed the back of my skull, a huge gap was torn right through the middle of the bridge. The Humvee in the center got the worst of it. It was closest. Before its front end could even turn, it plunged straight into the thick, hard shell on the monster's side. Its wheels spun wildly in the air, rubber grinding against the monster's shell, sending up thick black smoke. The smell of burning rubber mixed with the stench of mud and rot flooded my nostrils. The monster shifted slightly, just a subtle tilt of its body, and the tightly locked floating bridge hooks began snapping off one by one. Those steel bolts, as thick as a palm, flew off under the immense tension. They whistled through the air like bullets, clanging against the metal framework around them, sparking a cascade of fire. A nearby soldier was trying to run to the bank when a flying lock catch hit him. He was flung like a rag doll, tumbling through the air several times before landing head first into the foam-covered river. Before I could even call out his name, the monster started moving again. Its deep gray back was covered in bulging lumps, like elephant skins swollen with water and then layered with stone slabs. As it pushed upward, the bridge deck beneath my feet tilted sharply. I gripped the railing with both hands, my knuckles turning white, my whole arm trembling. The guys in the vehicles behind started fighting back. They cocked the heavy machine guns mounted on the roofs and opened fire on that mountain of flesh. The bullets hit the thick, deep gray shell with a sharp, crisp sound, like someone pounding a sledgehammer against raw iron. Each round that struck sent up a burst of sparks, but the monster didn't even flinch. The bullets all ricocheted off. Some hit the water, kicking up tall columns. Others flew into the sky. Its shell was just too thick. The bullets only left tiny white marks, unable to penetrate. Aim for the gaps. Hit the soft spots. The squad leader shouted from the bank, waving his arms. A few other soldiers grabbed grenades, pulled the pins, and tossed them into the crevices between the mountain of flesh and the bridge deck. With a series of muffled explosions, clouds of water and smoke engulfed the monster. I thought, that should do something, right? But as the smoke cleared a bit, I saw that what the monster was releasing was nothing like we expected. It wasn't bleeding. From the gaps in its shell, it was spewing a jet-black, viscous liquid, thick as high-pressure hydraulic oil. This black goo sprayed everywhere. Some splattered onto the windshield of the vehicle behind. Some coated the machine gun's muzzle. I saw the gunner trying to pull the bolt to keep firing, but the black goo instantly gummed up the gun's parts. He yanked hard, his face turning red, but the bolt was stuck solid, like it had been welded shut. Then, the vehicle beneath my feet started to give out. The Humvee's drive shaft, coated in the goo, let out a series of cracking sounds, and the whole truck began sliding down the tilted bridge deck. Mike was pounding on the window inside, his face contorted with effort, shouting something, but the screech of tearing metal was so loud, I couldn't hear a thing. One of the monster's limbs suddenly shot out from beneath the water. It was as thick as a millstone, covered in dense, hooked barbs. Like a giant fork, it stabbed straight into the pontoon under the bridge deck. That metal pontoon, weighing several tons, was punctured clean through with a bang, as easily as crushing a soda can. High-pressure air burst out from inside, blasting my eyes shut. I saw the ring of horn-like teeth around the monster's bottom churning open and shut at lightning speed making a sound like a giant rock crusher grinding stone. It was slowly dragging the broken steel toward its belly. The once connected pontoon bridge was now completely shattered into a few isolated islands bobbing on the water. The section of deck I was holding on to kept sinking. Every time that mountain of flesh moved, the whole river shook with it. I glanced at the shore and saw my brothers there in total chaos. Some were looking for ropes, others were running toward us. But the massive gray shadow on the water had already cut off every path straight to the top of my head. The monster's body kept emerging, its wrinkled skin like soaked elephant hide oozing that black glue nonstop. The white foam on the water grew thicker, rising to my knees. I tried to lift my foot and found my boot sole stuck to the black slime. Every move felt like I was about to rip the bridge deck up. Just then, I saw the monster's two claws, as big as millstones, slowly settling onto the roof of Mike's vehicle. The barbs on those claws pierced the roof's metal skin inch by inch, making a screeching sound of tearing steel. The roof's metal crumpled like paper under those claws, gouging deep grooves. Right as that big thing was about to tear Mike's roof off, it suddenly stopped. The violent motion that seemed ready to flip the whole river ceased abruptly. That deep gray mountain of flesh began to shrink back under the water, its thick, slab-like armor plates sinking slowly into the white foam. The whirlpools on the surface shrank too, until only the broken halves of the pontoon bridge swayed in the river. Everything around went dead silent, so quiet it made my ears itch. Only the sound of water slapping against the wrecked metal and a few brothers shouting our names from the distant shore remained. "Did that thing run off?" someone whispered from the opposite bank. The company commander stood on the shore, holding binoculars, his hands trembling. He wiped the mud off his face and yelled for everyone to grab ropes and crowbars to help. I slowly let go of the handrail I'd been gripping, my palms slick with sweat and that slippery black glue. I gasped for air, crouching on the remaining bridge deck, staring at the Humvee half submerged in the water. The door was still jammed shut. Mike inside had stopped pounding the glass. He pressed his face against the window, eyes wide, staring down into the water. I shouted at him, "Mike, hang on, we're coming to pull you out." I yanked a nylon rope from my waist pouch and crawled toward him, watching the deck beneath my feet. Then I noticed something really strange. Those aluminum bridge panels were as cold as ice, even with the blazing sun overhead. A white chill was rising from the metal surface, and the black slime hadn't sunk with the monster. It moved like it was alive, slowly flowing through the gaps in the panels, stretching into thin black threads. Every step I took, the contact between my boot sole and the deck made a sticky drip sound like peeling off strong adhesive. The foam on the water hadn't dissipated yet, piling up thick and dirty along the bridge edge. I looked down and saw tiny red specks hidden beneath the foam. They flickered in the water, like many little eyes staring at me. I crawled to Mike's car and reached out for the door handle. The moment my fingers touched the metal, the whole bridge shuddered violently. It wasn't a side-to-side sway, but a deep, internal tremor, as if the iron slab under our feet was trembling. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the icy bridge deck. From beneath the water, I heard a low, grinding sound. Crack, clawing on the steel bars with enormous teeth. Strangely, the bits of wood and trash that should have been drifting downstream were now all stuck around the broken bridge, not moving at all. The current was still flowing forward, but these things seemed to be sucked in by something, circling endlessly around our little spot. The black glue in my palm grew stickier, even starting to crawl up my arm along my sleeve. I shook my hand hard, but it wouldn't come off. I looked up at Mike, and his eyes were full of unease as he pointed under the car. I followed his gaze. In the murky, muddy water, the huge, deep gray shadow hadn't gone far at all. It was pressed right under the bridge deck, with limb segments as thick as millstones hooking one by one onto the base of the pontoons. It seemed to be waiting for something, or slowly gathering strength to drag this whole iron frame into the pitch-black riverbed. I had my hand on Mike's car door handle, and a bone-chilling cold shot through my fingertips. At that very second, the scene before me suddenly shifted. The Hummer stuck in the bridge gap jumped upward without any warning. The jolt was massive, like a giant underground had thrown a muffled punch from below. The force threw me backward, and I landed hard on the cold aluminum plate. Before I could get up, I saw dozens of pitch black, long spines burst out from Mike's car. These spines were bizarre, each as thick as an arm, with tips sharp and gleaming, piercing straight through the thick steel base. Mike let out a distorted scream from inside the car, shrinking back into the rear seat. The black spines didn't stop. They thrashed wildly inside the cabin, tearing the sturdy seats into strips of rags. I heard the sound of metal being punctured. Thump, thump, a dense, endless noise. Only then did I realize those black spines weren't wood or stone at all. They were alive. They were covered in a layer of fine, snake-like scales, constantly oozing that black glue. As soon as the glue flowed out, it quickly sealed the holes in the cabin floor, welding Mike and the car together completely. "Run! Back off!" The squad leader on the bank shouted at the top of his lungs. I desperately tried to crawl back, but as soon as my hand touched the bridge deck, I felt the entire pontoon bridge sinking. It was happening fast, and the water had already reached my ankles. I looked down and saw that the pontoons, which should have been floating, were now all tangled in those black threads. These threads were dense, like a giant black spiderweb, growing from that deep gray shadow underwater, pulling every bridge section relentlessly down. Then, the deep gray meat mountain in the middle of the river surfaced again. It was even bigger than before, a full size larger. The thick, armor-like carapace on its back was opening and closing. With each opening, it spewed a cloud of white gas. The moment this gas hit the air, it hissed loudly. I saw an oil drum at the bridgehead get hit by the gas, and the thick iron instantly crumpled like plastic paper burned by fire. I heard a massive metallic cracking sound beneath my feet. The entire pontoon bridge, dozens of meters long, split in the middle at that moment. The thick steel cables connecting the bridge sections were pulled taut by the monster, then snapped one by one. The broken cables whipped through the air, slicing off half the roof of a nearby Hummer. I saw two brothers inside the car, trying to jump out, but their soles were all stuck by that black glue. They could only watch helplessly as the vehicle tilted, and then the whole car, along with the bridge deck, was dragged by the black goo around the monster into the muddy river. A massive whirlpool formed on the water surface, filled with white foam and flickering red specks. That deep gray behemoth was now fully exposed above the water. On its millstone-like body, countless long legs with barbs had grown. Every time these legs moved, they punched a big hole in the hard bridge deck. It rampaged across the bridge, crushing the multi-ton aluminum blocks like cookies. I heard the cracking sounds under the bridge growing denser and denser. The metal fragments crushed by the monster didn't sink to the riverbed. They were all sucked onto its shell, quickly getting wrapped in that black glue. Its body grew thicker and heavier, and the crushing pressure made the air around me feel thin. Half of Mike's car had already been swallowed by the monster's folds. I saw Mike pressing his face against the glass, his mouth wide open, his hands clawing frantically at the window, leaving white streaks. The black slime from the monster had smeared across the entire windshield, and his face grew blurrier behind that black goo. I realized my own situation was just as dire. The bridge plank under my feet was sliding rapidly toward the monster. Those black threads had wrapped around my legs, crawling up my pant legs. I could feel them tightening, cutting into my muscles with a sharp pain. I swung my crowbar at the threads, but they were as tough as steel wire. The crowbar left no mark. The heavy machine gun on the shore fired again. Bullets rained down on the monster's side, but this time, it didn't even spark. The steel fragments and black glue coating the monster had formed an incredibly hard armor. The bullets sank into the glue like mud into the sea, without a trace. The monster let out a low rumble, and the whole valley trembled. The water under my feet suddenly turned red, and those little red dots floated up one by one. That's when I realized they weren't glowing points at all. They were tiny bugs, no bigger than a fingernail. They had round suction cups, densely packed in the metal gaps of the bridge deck, rapidly chewing through the aluminum alloy. I watched the once thick metal plates turn into a honeycomb of holes under their gnawing. I stepped on a hollow spot, my foot sank in, and half my leg plunged through. Those little red bugs immediately crawled up my boot, and I could feel their cold bodies against my skin. I yanked my leg out desperately, pulling a long string of black glue. That deep gray mountain of flesh had now crawled to the center of the bridge. It slammed its millstone-thick tail into the water, sending a wave 3 stories high. The broken pontoon wreckage tumbled in the surge like toys. I saw the truck on the opposite bank trying to tighten the steel cables, attempting to pull our side of the bridge back. But the monster was too strong. The truck's tires spun wildly in the mud, spewing white smoke that blanketed the shore. The steel cables groaned like thunder, and I felt that arm-thick chain could snap at any moment. Mike's car let out one final scream, the sound of metal being crushed flat. The entire vehicle was engulfed by the monster's flesh folds, leaving only a black lump exposed. I was getting closer to the monster. I could see the spinning gear rings in the gaps of its shell. They were deep purple, covered in shattered metal debris. With every rotation, they ground a chunk of steel into powder. The stench now completely surrounded me. I lay on the bridge deck, crawling the opposite direction with all my limbs, but my body kept sliding into the gap of those open flesh folds. I felt a massive suction force from underwater, pulling my clothes and my backpack into that abyss. The black shadow underwater shifted again. Those black threads began to thrash. Their bodies were also tangled in these threads. They weren't sinking. Instead, the threads yanked them out of the water like puppets, hanging them around the monster's body. Those brothers swung their arms stiffly, their clothes covered in those glowing red bugs. I clung desperately to a drainage hole on the bridge deck, my fingertips bleeding, but I didn't dare let go. I watched the wreckage of Mike's car get ground to bits by the gear rings under the monster. Shiny metal shavings flew everywhere, landing on the water and being swallowed by the white foam. One of the monster's limbs slammed down right in front of me. That foot was less than 4 inches from my head. I could see the barbs on the limb slowly retracting, gouging deep furrows into the aluminum bridge deck. The cold air seeped down my scalp, and I felt like I was freezing solid. I felt the bridge plank under my feet lose all buoyancy in that moment. The entire steel platform began to tilt and plunge into the water. I watched as the large pontoons that had been supporting the bridge deck were crushed flat one by the pressure from below. Bubbles exploded from under the water, completely blocking my view. The last thing I saw was Mike's car vanishing entirely into that deep gray shadow. Then, the icy river water surged in from all sides, slamming me against the shattered bridge deck. I lost my balance and tumbled among the clattering steel fragments. I felt a cold, black thread tightening around my neck, digging into my flesh bit by bit. The black thread around my neck grew tighter and tighter, and I could barely breathe. I clawed at it with both hands, my fingernails filling with that sticky black glue. I rolled across the broken bridge planks as those tiny red bugs crawled into my collar, their icy touch against my back making my kept firing relentlessly, the da-da-da sound blending into a continuous roar. I saw one of the guys on the shore. He had completely lost it. He dropped his rifle, grabbed his hair with both hands, and let out a string of incomprehensible screams. He turned and bolted toward the woods on the bank, but slipped, fell into a mud pit, and still scrambled deeper, crawling and rolling. The remaining soldiers were firing wildly into the middle of the river. Bullets struck the water around the monster, kicking up dirty columns of spray. One soldier ran out of ammo, but kept pulling the trigger, the click-click-click of the firing pin echoing as his eyes went blank and his legs shook like a sieve. I lay on the tilted bridge deck, staring at the crushed Humvee. Mike's face appeared one last time behind that black slime, his mouth wide open, his palms pressed hard against the glass. Then I heard a crack, and the whole vehicle like a crushed soda can, was squeezed into the monster's body by its folds. That deep gray mountain of flesh let out a low, rumbling hum. The sound traveled through the bridge planks, where the ring of teeth like a rock crusher spun faster. With each rotation, it spewed out a mass of black debris. As soon as it hit the water, it turned into more slender black threads, racing toward the shore. The bridge plank beneath me tilted even more. The water had already reached my stomach. Those red bugs started gnawing at my clothes, and I could hear the faint sound of fabric tearing. I glanced back at the shore. The heavy truck pulling the steel cable was still reversing frantically, its tires churning up acrid white smoke in the mud. The cable, as thick as a bull's rim, was pulled taut, making a sound like a string about to snap. "Lock the truck! Don't let go!" The squad leader shouted, jumping up and down on the bank. It hit me. To secure the bridge blocks, we had left a bundle of heavy winch chains on the shore, still unopened. One end of those chains was hooked to the truck's chassis, and the other end hung on the edge of my precarious bridge plank. Just then, the mountain of flesh gave a violent shake. The thick armor plates on its back fanned open, spraying a jet of pitch-black slime that splattered directly onto the faces of the guys on the opposite bank. I saw the soldier closest to me clawing at his face with both hands, trying to peel off the slime, but the glue was too strong. The more he pulled, the tighter it got. He writhed in the mud, his body wrapped in layers of black threads. I couldn't wait any longer. I pushed myself up on the bridge deck, struggling to pull my leg out of the metal hole it was stuck in. My boot was gone, and the sole of my foot pressed directly onto the dense carpet of red bugs. The slippery, icy sensation made my whole body tremble, but I didn't care. I fumbled in my tactical pouch and pulled out the last 2 blocks of explosives. They were hard like bricks. I bit open the fuse cap, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the explosives into the water. My target was less than 2 meters ahead. It was the last few load-bearing pins connecting our bridge plank to the monster's side. Those thick metal rods had been twisted into strange shapes, riddled with holes gnawed by the red bugs. If I could blow those points, the truck on the shore could pull my bridge plank back. I pushed forward, crawling inch by inch across the bridge deck, enduring the stench. The monster's massive limbs swung above my head, the wind they kicked up stinging my face. I crawled up next to the load-bearing pin. It was covered in that black slime, so slippery I couldn't get a foothold. Gripping the jagged metal edge with both hands, I jammed the first explosive block into the twisted gap. Just then, that monster turned around. Its massive, millstone-like body faced me directly. I could even see the deep purple flesh writhing in the gaps of its shell. The high-frequency vibration made my vision blur. I reached for the second explosive block. My fingertips touched those red bugs, and they immediately burrowed under my nails. The piercing pain almost made me scream, but I clenched my teeth and shoved the block hard into another metal buckle. Pull me back. I waved frantically at the shore. The truck's engine roared with a deafening blast. The steel cable jerked violently, making a sound that could slice through the air. That mountain of flesh seemed to sense what I was up to. One of its limbs swept toward me, kicking up a spray of black, glue-like water. The barbed leg slammed into the bridge deck less than half a meter away, smashing the thick aluminum plate straight into the water. The impact sent me flying, crashing hard into the wreckage of the Hummer. A sharp pain shot through my shoulder, maybe a cracked bone, but I couldn't care less. I saw the indicator light on the explosive block flashing. I grabbed the steel cable connected to the truck with both hands. The red bugs had crawled up to my neck, but I didn't bother brushing them off. I curled into a ball, clinging desperately to the cold iron chain. Just then, the truck on the opposite bank gave a sudden yank. I felt the entire bridge plate shudder violently. The monster noticed too, extending hundreds of thin black threads to wrap around the other end of the plate. It pulled toward the water while the truck hauled toward the shore. The steel cable's screech grew louder and sharper. I could see the thin wires snapping one by one, tiny sparks dancing before my eyes. I closed my eyes and hooked my feet tightly around the metal rings. Boom! The explosive went off. A massive wave of heat slammed into me from behind. Shards of shattered metal rained down like hail on the water around me. Then a huge force flung me forward. It was the truck's sudden backward lurch after losing resistance. The bridge plate I was on slid across the water toward the shore like a drifting piece of wood. Behind me, the deep gray mountain of flesh let out a strange cry, like thousands of pieces of glass grinding together. The black threads that had been wrapped around the bridge snapped, and thick globs of black slime splattered through the air. I felt the bridge plate slam hard into the muddy bank. The violent impact threw me off the deck. I plunged headfirst into the soft mud, my nose and mouth filling with that bitter taste. I scrambled forward, clawing at the dirt, desperate to get away from the water. I glanced back. That massive, deep gray creature was slowly rising from the center of the river. Its limbs flailed in the air, churning up white foam that already covered half the river. Mike's Hummer wreckage had become part of its body, hanging like a bizarre ornament on its shell. I saw the guys on the shore frantically dragging me uphill. My legs and arms were covered in purple-blue marks from the restraints, and those red bugs were still wriggling under my skin. I lay on the slope, spitting out muddy water. The river was still murky. The huge black whirlpool hadn't disappeared. It spun slowly, swallowing the remaining steel frames and debris. The deep gray mountain of flesh sank back into the water, leaving only a patch of white, stinking foam bobbing on the surface. I'd barely rolled a few times in the mud when the whole river suddenly erupted upward like it was boiling. The deep gray monster hadn't retreated after the explosion. It had gone completely mad. Its dome-shaped body, as wide as half a football field, burst from the river's center into the air, carrying tons of mud and water. I craned my neck to look. It blotted out the sun, casting a massive shadow over me. "Run! Head for the high ground," the squad leader shouted, scrambling toward the edge of the woods. I wanted to run too, but I'd lost one of my boots long ago, and the soles of my feet were throbbing with pain as I stepped on those sharp rocks. At that very second, the massive dark gray creature slammed heavily onto the shoal. Boom! The sound left my ears ringing with a constant buzz. The mud and sand on the shoal shot up several meters high, like a black wall. I saw the heavy truck that had been parked on the shore get flipped over by the shockwave from the monster's landing. The truck's thick steel rims scraped violently against the ground, throwing off sparks brighter than any holiday fireworks. One of the monster's limbs, a bizarre leg as thick as a millstone, covered in black barbs, swept horizontally toward us. I watched helplessly as that leg crashed into two large pine trees on the bank. Those trees, which would take two people to wrap their arms around, snapped like two crackers in several pieces, crashing down toward me with their dense needles. I ducked into a mud pit. Feeling the branches was past my steel helmet. "Machine gunner, open fire. Aim under it." The company commander shouted from behind a large rock. The remaining brothers set up two heavy machine guns on a dirt slope and pulled the triggers frantically. The rattling sound merged into a continuous roar. 12 7mm bullets traced red streaks through the air, smacking against the thick shell of that mountain of flesh with a series of pings. But the result was the same as before. The bullet tips hit the horn-like armor, which acted like reactive armor, producing a string of clangs like striking raw iron, then ricocheted everywhere. I saw a stray bullet graze the hood of a Humvee, tearing a gaping hole in the metal. The mountain of flesh got enraged. The toothed rings at its bottom started opening and closing wildly, making a grinding noise like 10,000 rock crushers working stone at once. It began to move forward. Its method of movement was bizarre. It wasn't crawling, but trembling all over with a high-frequency vibration. With each tremor, the muddy ground beneath it turned into a soupy mess, and the surrounding river water churned into white foam. It was getting closer to me. I could see a black gelatinous liquid oozing from the gaps in its shell. This liquid flowed down its body onto the ground, quickly gluing together the scattered rocks and mud on the bank. The slime seemed alive, creeping along the ground toward my feet, sticking my remaining boot firmly in place. I struggled to pull my leg free, but the stickiness was terrifyingly strong. Cover me. Where I had one last roll of high-strength detonating cord meant for blowing up bridge piers. My hands fumbled through it, finding the detonator. I saw one of the monster's limbs heading straight for my head. The barbs on it gleamed with a cold blue light. If that thing hit me, I'd be impaled on it for sure. I threw my body sideways. The black limb grazed my shoulder and plunged into the mud. It sank 2 meters deep, splattering mud all over my face. Seizing the chance, I looped the roll of detonating cord around that thick limb. Without checking its reaction, I frantically pulled the I pressed the detonation button. Boom! The detonating cord exploded at the base of the monster's limb. Large clumps of black slime rained down like a storm. The liquid stuck to my clothes, burning so hot it made me hiss. I saw that massive leg wobble unsteadily, black slime gushing from the wound and splattering all over the ground, trapping several small red bugs trying to climb up. But this monster was too huge. Losing one leg meant nothing to it. Its body, as heavy as a skyscraper, lunged forward. The reinforced concrete bridge bunker behind me, which I'd been using as cover, was crushed like a rotten tomato under its weight. Concrete chunks flew everywhere, and steel bars twisted into pretzels. I felt an immense pressure squeezing the air out of my lungs as the creature's massive form displaced the air around me. Just then, I saw the company commander driving another Humvee loaded with explosive charge in. "Move! Everyone move!" the commander yelled. He floored the gas pedal, and the wheels dug 2 deep ruts into the mud. The vehicle slammed straight into the toothed rings of the monster's underside. I saw the front of the car instantly ground to powder by those horn-like teeth. Shiny metal shards flew everywhere. Just as the whole vehicle was about to be swallowed whole, the commander jumped out of the cab, rolling several times on the ground. Then, a muffled rumble came from under the monster's belly. It was a very cohesive explosion. Dozens of explosive charges detonated right at its softest, most reeking underbelly. That mountain of flesh leaped a full meter into the air. Several chunks of its dark gray carapace were blown off, revealing deep purple flesh beneath that quivered incessantly. Buckets of black gelatinous fluid gushed out like a fountain, staining the ground for dozens of meters around as black as ink. The monster let out an extremely loud, vibrating roar. The sound made my gums bleed. It started retreating. Its jointed limbs scraped wildly through the mud, kicking up a mess of shattered steel, rotten wood, and rocks. It backed into the water. The momentum was so fierce that when it crashed back into the river, it kicked up another massive wave, sweeping 2 Humvees on the bank straight into the water. I lay flat in the mud, gripping a steel rebar driven deep into the ground. The river began to churn violently. That dark gray mountain of flesh slowly sank beneath the surface, dragging down with it a huge, pitch-black whirlpool dozens of meters in diameter. I watched the white foam, broken wooden frames, and the crushed Humvee wreckage floating on the surface all get swallowed by that vortex. A final burst of explosions rumbled up from underwater, muffled, shaking the entire river. The surface gradually calmed. Those flickering red dots were gone too. The once murky river now turned pitch black, thick with that viscous liquid. I could hear my own breathing like a bellows. I rested my head on the wet mud. The silence around me was terrifying, broken only by the distant puttering of vehicles that hadn't been turned off yet. I looked at my hands, covered in black gelatin, the burning sensation still lingering. On the river, only a few broken steel cables swayed in the current. That big thing, the monster that had crushed a heavy pontoon bridge like a cookie, had sunk with all our gear into the bottomless riverbed. A few comrades dragged me up to the dry grass on the high slope. I lay on my back, spitting out mouthfuls of gritty, dirty water. The white foam on the river hadn't fully dissipated, and the air was thick with the stench of motor oil mixed with dead fish. I turned my head and saw that the spot where we'd been building the bridge was now empty, with only 2 broken steel cables hanging over the muddy bank, occasionally swaying. The company commander sat on a rock nearby, one sleeve completely gone, a chunk of skin missing from his arm. He didn't speak, just stared blankly at the water. I looked down at my legs. My once sturdy camouflage pants were now shredded strips clinging to my calves. I lifted the fabric and saw my skin covered in countless rice-sized red pits. They were from those little red bugs biting me earlier, each pit oozing clear fluid. My right hand was still trembling uncontrollably. I noticed a small lump of black glue stuck between my fingers, now dried and hard as stone. I tried to pick it off, but it tore off a layer of skin with it, making me wince. Just then, a medic ran over with a medical kit. He flipped open my eyelids to check, then felt the wound on my shoulder. My shoulder was sunken, with a bone fragment poking up through my shirt, forming a small peak. "Where's Mike?" I heard someone ask quietly behind me. No one answered. I turned to look at where that truck had overturned earlier. A terrifyingly deep, large round pit was left in the mud, filled with black slime. In that slime, I spotted a crushed metal plate, Mike's license plate, now twisted like a pretzel, with a few long black fibers stuck to it. Smoke was still rising from the woods on the opposite bank, flames from the earlier explosion licking at the leaves. The river's flow gradually steadied, but the water remained dark, that ink-black current drifting downstream. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a half-used length of fuse. I tossed it into the mud, watching it slowly sink into the mire. The sky darkened. The few of us left started moving toward the trucks. I walked slowly, one bare foot sinking into the mud. With each step, I could feel something gently pulsing under my skin. I pressed my hand against that spot, and the flesh beneath vibrated with the same frequency as that monster underwater. Closing echoed harshly through the empty river valley.